1 minute. I realize I don't have. There we go. I'm not using the right scene for what I'm actually wanting to display. Sorry about that. So, check my phone, make sure everything is working. All right. Like a 4-second delay at most. So, we're doing pretty good. I do have the teleprompter set up now with a second copy of OBS flipping vertically the Discord, so I should be able to see your chat much easier now. The lighting and camera I have been playing with. Yeah, you can hear me. Good evening, everyone. Also, somebody said in chat, I agree. So we're gonna start on time today. Unfortunately, I apologize. I know it's unusual. But everybody has an off day where they start on time. Today is sort of another catch-up day. We're just going to cover a couple simple topics, and I'm going to elaborate on how you would do text parsing more easily for the assignment or assignments. I'm going to demonstrate you the basics of regular expression. Some of you have messaged me with questions, and it's apparent that some of the concepts don't quite make sense when you're trying to learn it on your own, and that's beyond reasonable. So we're going to cover it in, a little bit today, and hopefully give you enough tools to where you can easily accomplish assignment 1. If not, in class on Thursday, I will go ahead and demonstrate how you can easily parse the code into an integer, a character, an integer, so that it's easy for you to handle that. There's other ways of doing it. I like regular expression. It makes it easy for you to know if there's any errors, but there's other ways of doing it too. You just read in integer, character, integer, but hey. All right. So, we left off last class, and we went through and we talked about callbacks and a little bit of basic threading. Did anybody actually understand that? I'm honestly, I would be a little surprised if people were solid with it. I expect everybody sort of understands the concepts, but not really how to do it on your own yet. That's sort of my estimation. Yeah, okay. Yeah, kind of, sort of, not really. You sort of get it, but you couldn't do it yourself type of thing. Is that where everybody's at? Is that where you're at too, Vinny? Or are you a little bit more? Okay. So that's fine. I just wanted to expose you to these concepts. We're going to cover them more in detail in the future. I just was sort of I like the concept of diving deep and then trying to tread water and show you why these things are important. It's a interesting. Oh. Well, that is unfortunate. I can't read the end of your statement because it's off the screen. So that is not ideal. I will have to fix that. Yes, I will help you with part of the assignment that's due on Thursday. The text processing, not the remainder of it. So, if you don't have the assignment, you need to have the assignment completed to at least that point, and then you'll be able to quickly drop in to a function, integer, string, integer. Yes, the assignment is due on Thursday at 11:59. That's why you need to have the majority of the assignment completed. If you haven't already completed it, you'll need to have the majority, all the logic, all the output, everything like that. You'll need that completed. What I'm going to help you with is the input Thursday. Honestly, we're going to cover it today, but I'll be more explicit. I'll give you hints today. I'll be more explicit on Thursday, if that clears it up. Okay, so, okay, so everybody understands the threading part of this, right? No, really, but okay. Parsing string has been here. Hold up. Kyle, is that the threading part still is uncertain to you? I'm not sure what you're answering there. The callback stuff is a little complicated and will take some trial and error to understand, to be honest. Yeah, the book won't call it parsing. It's just text input. But that's fine. Yeah, we'll cover the text parsing. It's not in the book, as far as I know. Well, I mean, one way is the way I'm going to show you, but it's not by no means is this even the simplest way. Regular expressions exist on page 408. Why do we have this book? It's to cover all the nuance and subtleties of the beginning parts of the material. It's for you to read on your own. Some instructors like to read you from the book. I like to demonstrate on top of the book. Well, the question was, if you didn't see, why do we have this book? The book is an excellent book, and it covers in detail, especially chapters 1 through 6, the basics of the Java syntax and language design, things like that. Believe me, this is so much better than the book I used. So, Oh yeah, no, I've always assumed that if you can't solve it from the book, you're going to have to use Google. That's perfectly correct. No, it's realistic. You might seem unintuitive, but that's realistic. The book is there as a shelf reference and or a curated source of information. In no class are you ever limited, like a history class, you're not limited to only the information in that one history book. You can always search more information out. Okay, I think we're getting a little sidetracked. Yes, and my act of giving you an assignment that doesn't have a single clear-cut answer is a method of instruction. It might not be one that you're used to, but it requires self-study. So technically, you're supposed to contribute 2 hours. Okay, if you want to go back in person, we can go back in person. That's not a difficult issue, but the instruction material will stay the same. You'll still have to learn a lot of this material on your own. Okay. Like I said, so if anybody wants us to go back in person, we'll have to go back in person. So we're going to have classes in person starting Thursday. So, okay. But like I was saying, this callback and threading, it was mainly just to wet your feet into the topics, basically. Just give you a brief overview, talk about it. I'll go ahead and I'll leave it uncommented. And one of the topics that we had, somebody asked me, was that we'll have how do you submit your assignment? And I wanted to go ahead and demonstrate that for you. Unfortunately, there's not a nice, simple answer to this, but what you can do is just right-click on your project and go to Open In and Show in Explorer. That will show the folder for your project. And then right-click, and if you have 7-zip installed, you can click Add to .zip, or where is the built-in one? Where is send to? Oh, send to. Compress zip folder. Just hit enter, and you'll notice. Oops. We have properties, and you'll have properties of size on disk is 52 kilobytes, and the actual compressed file will be 16, roughly in this case. Your assignment will vary based on exactly what code you have in it, etc. And then you'll just submit the zip folder. I will give naming conventions for how you need to rename this on Thursday. So if you you can just submit it as is. It's fine. I'll be able to know by the system. I don't need unique names for this yet. So you can just submit this as your solution. The bad thing about this is you'll see it has the out folder. This is actually the compiled version of your application. If we go down way low, it has the .class files, the compiled version of it. So, but for right now, our applications that you guys are all going to be writing are going to be small enough to where it won't be an issue. So and if for some reason you should be able to upload, and if for some reason you can't upload it, you can add at the end of the correction. If you have view settings set to where you see common extensions, you can rename the extension. So if you're going to email it or something like that, that's how you bypass a lot of nonsense preventions for safety to prevent code from being emailed and things like that. Normal people aren't software developers, so in their case, it makes sense not to accept zip files of code. But for developers, sometimes it's just easier to send a zip file, so something to know. Does anybody have any questions about that? How to just make the zip file? It's pretty straightforward. It's not difficult. If you have 7-zip, which I recommend, it's a free open source compression tool. You can just click it and it does the same thing. Same size and whatnot. So it's not a big issue. Okay, so nobody has any questions about how to make the zip file? Going once? Going twice? No? Okay. So we'll just get rid of this for now. And uncomment this. And as somebody mentioned earlier, what I was going to do is show you exactly how I Googled Java regex matcher. I happen to know that that was the best terms to pick, and it will, because I know matcher is the name of the class. There's a Java W3 Schools link. It's a good reference. The book also has it. Let's look at that. 408. Yeah, the book also has this content. It shows you a fair amount of examples too. But this is a straightforward example. All I did was I copied this, I brought it into IntelliJ, put it in a method. It might not show the patterns. Not on this page. It sort of starts to talk about it. Here's some of the patterns that it's talking about. Mind you, you kind of have to understand where it's going for this to make sense. Oh, no. Don't want Java threads. I'm guessing that's all they talk about it. They do give you enough information to write what you're looking for, but you would have to experiment. So let's do it this way. Let's delete this. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and show you how to do it and explain it. That way it's more concrete and I'm not trying to dodge around the answer. The operator part, somebody says they're stuck on the operator part, and the operator part is actually the easiest part. But you have to know the trick. So I'll show you. Now, if you look, it tells you /D finds a digit. Okay, you come here and it tells you there's a legal character exception. Why? Because it needs you to type /D. /D is the character that it's looking for to signify a digit. /D is the escaped version of /D. It's unfortunately one of those nuances when it comes to regular expression or anytime you're doing pattern matching of any type. Often, like sometimes you'll pattern match a pattern match and then you'll end up with something like this where you're escaping multiple times to try and eventually end up with a single backslash. It's one of those things that just kind of is painful. So let us matcher dot Okay. So group 0 was found 1. So it found a digit and it found 1. Okay, well, but that's not what we want. We wanted 12. So you could do this and it'll find 12. But when you try something like this, it's not going to find 2. It's going to find the next 12. Well, let's make this 23 just for clarity. Does that make sense? So we're looking for 2 digits in a row. That's not the right answer, but does this make sense to everybody that you're looking for 2 digits in this string and then you find it? Okay. Well, how do you find a range of digits? Yes. That's how you find a range of digits. Or a range of any number of things. This time it found 2 by itself. And let's see. Oh, there's an exception. Now, I know what a group is, so I'm cheating. But let me show you what a group is. A group is inside parentheses in the search feature. This is still going to run. Yeah. Let's make it clearer. That way there's no misunderstandings. But let's do this. All right, I am going to confuse you if I continue to do that. So I will backtrack. And we will do it this way. There we go. So group 0 is the input. Group 1 is the solution, or the what it found inside the first set of parentheses. Does that make sense? So group 0 is always, or should, as far as I know, is always the input. And then 1 is what it found inside the parentheses. Now we can do this. Clear that up. Notice here's the full input. Here's the first group, which is the X. Here's the second group, which is the digits. Let's make this a single digit. And there's our single digit file. Mind you, these are still strings that it's returning. Yeah, you need to use the matcher with the pattern like this, if you want to use it like this. And then if it finds the pattern that you're looking for, grab the results from the pattern, and we'll go there. So let's go back to our, like this. Notice it will still work, because it still finds X4. But what happens when I make this a minus? Let's make that 8 minus 4. Match not found. Yeah, the other solution to this is scanner, but you don't want to mix and match them. You either want to use a scanner for all of it, or you want to use regular expression for all of it. Scanner, however, let's look at the book. Scanner, first mention of it is 28, and it talks about it in detail in 94, 41, 53, 41. 41 is probably, that's the next method. Let's see what it says. Yes. Gets the next word. So yeah, you would vary between those. Okay. Now, here's a nice thing. And here's the power of regular expression. There's quantifiers, so you can say exactly how many you want. Contains 0 or 1 occurrences of n, 0 or more occurrences of n, so it doesn't even have to have any, or at least 1 n. But you have your special characters, period. Change it to divide. It finds divide. Now I make this a underscore. It will find underscore. That is a very powerful character. Dot star will match any number of characters. But just leave it as dot, and we can do another group before it. Digits. Make a group of digits 1 to 2. Duplicate this row, change it to 3. And sorry for that. thought I had disabled all chats. But so this doesn't catch wrong characters. And we want to have specifically what characters we provide. Okay. We can do that with but it tells us the legal character range, because that's a what is going on here? So interesting. When I type it, it doesn't work right, though. I paste it, it does. Let's just try that. That is really weird. Huh. I wonder if my character are off in Unicode or something. Okay, so my point was... Oh. Ah, that's why. I didn't have a double escape. So underscore doesn't match. Yeah. Sorry. I didn't have the double escape on the minus sign. So let me explain what I just did. Delete this. I put in a pattern. Specific. Find one of the characters on the options in the brackets. So A, B, C. If I had B here, it will match that. If I have D here, it won't match that. Now, if you're paying attention, we've talked about error handling. This is a really nice way of validating the entire string. So that's why I prefer this methodology over using the scanner and parsing the text that way. But they're both valid. Now, in this bracket, we have X for multiplication, plus sign for addition, and the order doesn't matter. So it will find this or this the same. So that's perfectly fine. Then we have / I always want to call that backslash, but that's / for division. Compile it, it works. And then we need the minus symbol. But, oh, I was getting overly clever. You don't need to escape minus. That's why. You don't need to escape minus. I was wondering, it didn't make sense why you need a double there, but that's why. So, Yeah. So if you don't know about grouping, you would have to mix and match scanner and regular expression. But the grouping is what makes it really powerful. And here's what's really powerful. Now that you have the group, you can actually rearrange the order by the output. So this is unbelievably useful when you're doing Notepad++ or Kate. And your Kate is a little... I'll show you that at some other time. I don't have Kate installed right now, but Notepad++ is free for Windows. You can do... Oh, you know what? Actually, I'll find an example of a CSV where you can take log files that are complex outputs, and you can use regular expression like this in the search replace. And you know, seriously, somebody said the possibilities are endless, LOL. And they're right. They are. This is knowing regular expression is like potentially or literally one of the most useful skills when you're working on as a sysadmin or you're working with large sets of data and things like that. So, it's not technically part of this course, but I do think it is valid in learning it in the course requirements for this course. But I do think it's extremely useful to learn this right now so that you can leverage this in this course and others. So here's this long gobbledygook of characters. But if we start cutting it apart and examining the inner parts of it, it starts becoming a lot more clear. Okay, so here's a group that contains digits that are at least 1 or 2 characters long. Here's another group that contains one instance of one of these characters. And here's another group of a digit from 1 to 2 characters long. You can't leave the spaces in there because regular expression cares about spaces. But you run it, and then you'll get strings for all of these. And you know that if the second group, or the group 1, and group 3 will be digits, so you should be able to safely convert those to integers. No problem. Is there a way to choose which groups go into what order with an input? They're in order of how you find them. Apparently you can name them too, but everybody knows it's just the order. So technically, this doesn't need to be a group, but then you wouldn't be able to have the output cleanly. Like, none of these have to be groups. But now I don't have a nice group. It's just 1 and 2. So here's group 1, and here's group 2. Does that make sense? So it's in order from left to right, the groups that are found inside the parentheses. And so here's your answer. This is how you would match the input for the assignments for right now. Notice there's some variables in here, like minimum number of characters for the integer, maximum, the special characters you got to deal with. Setting this up isn't always the most clean, but I think this is the cleanest way of actually parsing data. once you know how to do it. Plus, it's very powerful later. You can do a lot of things with it. So, you could do this. Three. Which is me help giving you a gimme. Oh, I'm sorry. One. No, if your code works the other way, it's perfectly fine. That's the point of this class, is to show you multiple ways of doing this. I'll go over the scanner. We'll see. We'll see how many people submit scanner, and if enough people do, we'll talk about it. Or maybe the inverse. I'll see. Oh yeah, you have an extreme amount of freedom and customizability in this. So yeah, scanner might not be the best solution, because you're just going to have to read it in all as one giant string, and then you're going to have to split the string, because scanner uses space delimiters. Yeah, space delimiters. So, oh yeah, if you want to do it this way, you're more than welcome. I'm not saying you can't do it. I was just saying you don't have to. If your solution works, all the more power to you. If you think this is cleaner and that this would be more useful to you, you're welcome to use this. That's why we're going over it today. If you're trying to use scanner to do the identifying of the numbers, yes. Scanner is great for just reading in the input, but that's it has limitations. But you might even still need to use. I'll have to read the assignment thing. You might still have to use scanner to read the input from the user, but that's a separate issue than parsing the input. This is for parsing the input. Does that make sense? I think I want to be clear on that. Okay. And that's why different classes are very useful, because you could have one that's user input, you could have one that's parsing the input, and then you can modify the user input to be, is it from a UI? Is it from like a simple like calculator app that you make on a web? We're not going to get into web apps or anything like that, but a web app or a desktop app or anything like that, or even Android. Like this logic here, well, not this, well, technically system out too. I think this entire code here would work in Android. So main won't. There's actually a main hidden somewhere in the Android operating system that you'll never see as a developer. So yes, it still technically exists, but you can't write your own. But you could just, I think, copy and paste this. I'll test that this evening and see. I'm kind of curious, but this should just work in Android. It should work on desktop applications, whatever the case is. So you're splitting up the logic as much as possible. So you have one for input, one for parsing, one for the logic of what you're doing with the input after you've parsed it. So the more you can subdivide your work, like conceptually, the more you can be like, well, this part works. All I need is this part. And faculty and Google are much more Stack Overflow, Stack Exchange, etc., are much more able to answer much smaller questions. You say, well, I don't know how to read input and parse it. Well, that's two big sections. So if you got the reading and the input, and you're getting the input, and you have the parsing, and then you have the logic, you can finagle the middle part. So that main above the code below, is that a function to test and see if the code below, yeah, all it does is it's calling this method. I could have put this code up in the main. I just put it in a method. That's all. Mind you, remember, there are imports you'll need. Yeah, there's just a, like, you would put here, string, input, string, something like that. And where does this string come from? Args or from the command line. I honestly forget how I wrote the assignment, if it even, I don't remember if it even says if it's from the command line arguments or from user input. It might be unclear. And when it's unclear like that, I would take either. So. And this is one of those cases where learning, and this regular expression is in and of itself an entire skill set. So learning a different skill set, like this is, you actually learn regular expression and how to build them and how they work in compiler design. Or at least that's where I did. You touch upon them in discrete math, which is CSIS 3710. But then you really cover them a lot in compiler design. But, like I said, they're a really useful skill to learn. Because you can do things like this, and then system administration, looking through logs, processing data, things like that. So, that's why we're covering it here. I think that's enough for that material for right now. Are there any other major questions with the assignments? Might as well cover them now, since we've spent the majority of the class on that. If you have further questions on this, that's welcome. Also, about the course in general, etc. Whatever. I don't want to limit what people were asking questions on. Oh, okay. Yeah. They're really powerful, and it's really useful to learn. And what's nice about this pattern, maybe in a different... Here's the note. Regular expression implementations differ based on what system you're using. So this is Java regular expressions. Perl or Unix or KDE might have slightly different nuances of how the regular expression works. So you can't always just copy and paste this and make it work. But the concepts are the same. So you might need to put... in particular, greedy versus non-greedy, which I won't get into, but that has to do with does it pick the longest or the shortest match, basically, possible. So, Okay. Greedy versus non-greedy varies greatly depending on the implementation of regular expression. But for this class and for this assignment, that's not a concern for you. I just wanted to let you know that if you start using regular expressions and things aren't working the way you expect, you'll know some key terms to search on your own. So we have about 20 minutes left. Are there any other questions or anything else anybody else has? If not, I think I'll cover threading a little bit, just to make that a little bit clearer, since people were a little confused on that. Somebody's typing something. We'll see what they have to say. Using regular expressions, how would you use the decimal places? Would it be the same? So sort of. Well, you wouldn't be able to use /d like this as a single group. What you would do is you'd have to explode out this group and plus I actually forget the exact syntax. I'll walk you through it pseudocode wise, but you'll have to say you know what? I think you can just match period with period. Don't know if when you get into special characters, finding special characters, it can become awkward. So I honestly don't remember how you would match a period. But that's one of those cases where you don't regex match decimal number. Yeah, you just find the answer online. I mean, that's sort of a cop-out, but it's the realistic one. So, oh, and they even were nice enough to give you the proper string. No, this assignment specifically does not require decimals because I knew and I remembered how difficult they can be. Like, this would be much harder for you guys to just find on your own. So that's why I specifically made this whole numbers only. And the only time you'll have decimals is in the output. And I do think it's important to know how to output decimals. So that's why I put it there. And that's currently only division. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So we talked a little bit about threads, and I'm going to keep it a lot simpler this time. I will comment that out. I will paste this code into somewhere in chat so that you have it. But we run this, literally nothing is going to happen. It's just going to run and exit. Okay. Why? Two main reasons. First one, this runnable has no code in the run, and I don't actually do anything with this thread. I run this, it's still not going to do anything, but it will technically take slightly longer because it will try to run this runnable. It will run the runnable and then do nothing because there's no runnable, there's no content in the runnable. So, great. But do this, now there's a runnable. Copy this. Now, a single runnable or a single thread doesn't always make a lot of sense, but we'll demonstrate this. Note, you can only start the thread once, so that's important to know. And okay. All right, we got time. Does this make sense so far, what I have here? This is the runnable. This is just an interface that has a method called run, and you put some code into it. And you can put code in different runnables, and you can run different runnables in different threads. Does that make sense to everybody? I think I kind of magic hand waved that away yesterday when I talked about it. Okay. So that's pretty straightforward. That makes sense. Now, it might not make sense why you're doing this, and honestly, any real example that I would show you would be kind of complex, and any contrived example is still going to be complex. So what I'm going to do is just show some simple weighting. So thread dot sleep and math dot random I thought this had parameters. Oh, yeah, that's right. You have to... Okay, I forgot. That's why. So, to get a random integer in a certain range is actually somewhat convoluted. Because what you have to do is... get the absolute value of the next random, multiply it. Yeah, that's fine. So we'll just set a hard number. This is going to sleep. This will sleep 2 seconds, and this will give us a warning. I talked about this before, but this is a try catch. The try catch catches the exception. The exception it needs to handle is if the thread interrupted. So let's pretend I just put a ton of zeros in here, and then I kill the application. Well, it needs to know that the application was killed while this thread was running. It would throw an exception. If the exception isn't handled, the app would crash. And that's not good. And there's technically multiple ways of killing a process. Some are clean and some are not clean. And this handles clean ways that allows your app to cleanly shut down. So let's move the statement to the end. And we'll see what happens. Notice they both are sleeping for 2 seconds, and they're both finishing at the same time. It can be a variable, but it needs to equal milliseconds, regardless. So, however you come up with that number, so I could do this, int time equals 1,000. Run it, it'll be exactly the same. So it can sleep until an event happens, but it's not called sleep. And that's a topic for another course. I'm just basically hand waving, trying to show you basic threading. What it does is then it waits for what's called an interrupt. So that's different. But yes, you can have threads sleep or wait until there's some type of input. So from the users. Now notice, new behavior is apparent. I run this, watch again what happens. The join means halt at this location in the code and wait until thread is done running. I run this, and we're going to be here quite a while. So I'm just going to kill it. Notice when I killed it, the app didn't crash because I have the exceptions. Yeah. I would have printed stack trace. Interesting. I have to think about what way that stops it. But the main point is there's threading here. So you can, and let me run this. We run it, and we're going to run into some interesting things here. Oops. No. I never fixed that. There we go. Notice thread 2 finished before thread 1. So this is what's called a race condition, and there's all types of fancy ways of solving this, and this is a lot of operating systems concepts that you'll get into. I just wanted to basically let you know about this and show you the runnables and the threads alone are not difficult to use. Figuring out how to make them play nicely together when you're doing a lot of work, that's really complex. So just running a single thread in the background, that's not difficult. And you might wonder, well, why would I want to do that? My app is still running. So Oh no. Here's thread 2, and it runs for 20 seconds. I can't do anything. The app doesn't respond. Well, what you could do is in here, instead of just a pure sleep, maybe you have a thread sleep 200. So 1/5 of a second. Oh, I could have just deleted the 0, but anyways. 4. Now, this will still sleep 20 seconds if my math is right, but you could do checks here. You could come up here and have a flag. Boolean. Private Boolean. Still run flag equals true. Come back down here. If well, while is easier. Actually, I don't know if you can do that. Anyways, I was just ad-libbing here. But there's a bunch of ways with while loops and for loops to where you can run the thread and have it sleep for smaller amounts of time. And then intermittently check to see if a flag has been set to tell the thread in the background running. Should you still run? No? Okay, then stop. That's all. The exact syntax, I forget offhand. It's not that important. I'm not going to require it from you. Oh, control backspace or /. I always want to call this back, but it's forward. It goes from bottom up, so forward. That's all. And if you think this is impressive, then you should see Doug, my PhD advisor. He uses Emacs, which is technically a text editor, but it's insane when you watch him using it. But he's been using it for 30 years, so it has a bunch of built-in functionalities. Like if you see this, you can move the code up and down like this. That's Alt-Shift, and then the up and down keys. The same is here for big sections of code. Control and then the / symbol. Whether it be forwards or backwards, whatever. I think forwards. I don't know. Maybe it's backwards. Oh, the /. So, yeah, I was right. /. Are there any other questions? Yeah, threading is not going to be part of the material I'm going to test you on. It's just something I wanted you to be aware of and be able to make basic threads. That way you're ahead of the game, basically. Because they are really useful when you need them. So, If you're interested in making a video game is essentially a single loop that runs in a thread, and that thread does everything. It's called the game loop. And then it calls other threads, generally one for sound, one for video, etc. So the motivation. I will make up an example that's actually valuable. The simplest one is, think you're doing matrix multiplication, where you have a bunch of different calculations. They're all intermingled, but they can all be ran in parallel. Then you would want to throw a bunch of threads at it. That's a simple answer to it. A video game is a perfect example. You want one thread updating the character locations, one thread handling audio input and output, one thread handling keyboard and mouse input, one thread displaying, updating the display, things like that. So, and then how you have these threads interact is what I was saying. That's the really complicated part. And don't worry about that. I'm not asking you to be able to do that or anything like that. YSU actually has a specific course that I teach, 4819. And why I'm covering this is so that you're prepared for that course when you reach that level. Yes, a simple program still runs in a thread. So, let's comment all of that out. Do int equals 6 divided by 0. Int d. And let's run this. And notice exception in thread main. The main thread has a special name called main. Yes, the thread I declared is actually the second thread of this application. Generally, in Android, you would consider this a background thread, and you would consider the main thread the UI thread. If that makes sense. I think that's a really good way of thinking of it, because in the UI, you want the application to be fluid and responsive to the user, but you still want to do long-running processes in the background, like network connections or fetching data from a server, or maybe doing a long calculation of analyzing some data, so trying to do speech recognition. It might take a couple of seconds, and you don't want the app to freeze while your speech recognition is going on, basically. Does that make sense? Modern hardware, the original Xbox, I believe, was dual core. I believe the Xbox 360 was tri-core. The Xbox Series S and X, or whatever that generation, 7th gen, I think, would be 8-core. The PlayStation 3 was, I want to say, single core with 7 SMTs, which are miniature processors. For the compiler to get bogged down, or the computer. Also, we're at the limit of the class time, so if anybody needs to leave, you're more than welcome to. If you have more questions, I'll continue to stay here and answer them. However many you have in your computer. So my desktop right now, I'm running a whatever. I am running a Ryzen 7 3700X that has 8 cores. Each core has 2 threads, so I can run 16 threads simultaneously. However, because of the marvels of how advanced operating systems runs, it has it cheats. You're only let's take a single core and a single thread. You can run a single core or single threaded operating system really efficiently, and Linux does this in a lot of cases, on a single thread and a single core that's only single threaded, by slicing up the operations of the application. So every application gets like 50 milliseconds of time to run. And what it does is it context switches between the applications it's running and enables you to have what you perceive as a really, really slow bag of carbon and water to be fluid. Whereas the computer, it's just juggling balls really quickly and making it seem like it's running all at once. So that's how, even on single core, like old like Pentium 2 machines, etc., that's how it would Windows 98, you could have more than one application open. Well, you only had one core. What it was doing was time slicing like that. That time slicing technology still exists. So the total number of threads you can have on a modern machine, insane, basically. Let's say 16 to some power, or multiplicative. So at least 4 to 8 is my guess. So well over 100, 200 threads, somewhere in that range, probably. Yeah, time slicing. It might have a better name. That's what I think of it as, but I think that's the right name, or one of them. Yeah, and so I'll figure out a better example for when I started typing it out, and I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm just going to confuse you if I continue on this path. Let me work on it my own. It's difficult to program and talk and whatnot all at once. So if once I get off this, I actually have more work to do, my day job, but then I'll make a sample program for you guys. I will make an Android app and show it to you. That'll be the easiest way, because then it'll make a lot more sense than anything else. Same with callbacks. So, but it is after course time. So if anybody has any questions, we're free to sit here and answer them. Oh, okay. So Kyle says he's fine with the class online. Yeah, no. And I didn't want to be terse with you when you were upset, and I understood that. It's a different style of teaching the material than maybe a lot of you are used to. I'm trying to teach you as much as possible in this course as quickly as possible. That way you can have a better understanding of everything. And that's why I'm using the book as a method for you to learn some of the material from. And then some of the material you will have to look up outside of the book. So that's why I went through beginning of the course to talk about, here's some sites, here's how you use Stack Overflow, here's how you use W3 Schools and HackerRank. I couldn't think of the name. So theoretically, every course should be able to be recorded, but unfortunately, the university doesn't have the hardware installed in enough laboratories and classrooms to enable that to be realistic. So Yeah, I do. Actually, out of curiosity, how many people do go back and rewatch? Oh no, that's why I was saying, Kyle. Like, I was going to give you the code. All you would have to do is drop it in place. That's all. It wouldn't have been difficult. The key is if you take the time beforehand to make your assignment designed to the point to where you can drop in the logic separate from the rest of the app. If the rest of the app is completed, then you would only take 20 minutes to drop in that code. And I'm sure some of the students here will attest to that. And that's a big part of the point of this assignment, is to demonstrate that to you. Because it doesn't matter how many times I tell you something. If you're pounding your head against the wall for a half hour and then you figure it out, then it'll be more educational, unfortunately. And how do I know that? There's a hole in the wall from where my head is generally banged at. Like I have the saying I tell all my students, I'm not a better programmer than all of you. I just happen to have 20 years experience banging my head against the wall. But that's the only difference. Yes, W3 Schools is really good. We did talk about that, didn't we? I thought we covered that. Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, that's why I gave you well over 2 weeks for the assignment, and we're progressively going through the solutions. So that way you have time to implement them. W3, I think we talked about. You know what? I talked about W3 in reference to other programming languages, and then some people talked about how it has Java, but I don't think we actually went there and looked at their Java section. I think that's what it was. W3 is really good for learning basics, but sometimes they don't handle nuance real well. That's why this book in particular is really good. It's a little dense, but it's useful. But once you learn the basics, you can then be able to read the nuance, and it makes more sense. So it's a repetitive concept. Yeah, I'm trying to get all of you to the point where I would be happy having you as interns at a company I'm working at after this class. Not that you're technically generally even going to be applying for them, but that's the basic understanding of how object-oriented programming is designed and how it interacts with different concepts. Like this threading is not object-oriented. But you need to understand the difference between old school threading, which is like a C concept, and how that interacts in an object-oriented environment. So we'll also be talking about Lambda expressions. We covered them a little bit. Functional programming, some event-based, which is the triggers and the callbacks. How object-oriented interacts with these other paradigms is important to understand object-oriented, basically. And then the software design patterns. If you can learn the basic of OO and the software design patterns and how OO interacts with other design paradigms, eventually by the end of the semester, where I think you're in a really good position. Better than I was when I took this class by at least 2x. And I learned a lot in this class, honestly. But yeah, and that's why I'm giving you plenty of time for these assignments. Now, the next assignment, assignment 2, you'll have over a week, and all you'll have to do is edit your current assignment and expand upon it. So it shouldn't be difficult for you. But all right, I think that's about it. Does anybody else have any further questions? Yes, Geeks for Geeks also has some explain some of the basic concepts. There's a bunch of sites out there that do. I know some people have class after this, so I didn't want to require people stay. Okay. Then we will go ahead and end the stream here. And looks like we'll still have the course online, so that'll help everybody, I think. It's fine to be. Some people aren't used to being frustrated in a class, and that's a good thing and a bad thing to be frustrated in a class. So as long as the answers come eventually, and that was my point of this class, was to make sure that you had I'm not going to require an assignment portion that you didn't feel comfortable solving. And I got a bunch of DM questions about that, so that's why we went over it more in detail. Yeah, I'm not. Data structures is difficult. There's no. It's just inherently difficult. And realistically, if you've taken data structures, that means you're at least a junior or a senior, and you should have taken this well before that. Wait, you mean algorithms or just data structures? Oh, wait, data structures, normal data structures. Yes, that is also difficult. Algorithms is like 4 times more difficult. The problem with data structures is it's actually really simple once you get it. But until you get it, it's very difficult. Algorithms, that's just inherently difficult. Yeah, Java is a really nice language for teaching these OO principles because you can focus. Somebody said they've always done C++ and they're loving Java even with no experience, because Java eliminates a lot of the I don't even want to say nuance, but just syntactic gobbledygook to do the same thing Java does. Mind you, C++ is a lot more powerful. Don't get me wrong. And it runs a lot faster in the general case. There are some rare exceptions, apparently, where super well-written Java can run faster than mediocre C++. But Java, if you're not, it's more whatever you're used to is really the difference. C++, its power lies in its power, basically, how much you can do with it. Whereas Java is much more friendly to the developer. Sage, are you a computer science major? I mean, regardless, you should have had to take 2610 or I think it's 2605. That should have been C++. Yeah, I don't hate C++. I enjoy it once I get it working, but getting it to the working point can be really frustrating. Ah, okay. Then yeah, this would be a very good course for you if you plan on taking software development classes. But all right, we will head out. I need to get some food in my body, or I will start getting hangry. So we will end here. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the Discord chat. That's why I made this server. So and as a lot of people can attest, I answer relatively quickly. So or try to, at least when I'm not sleeping. And we will get to that, and hopefully Thursday's course, I'll figure out exactly what we're doing. We will have our first quiz that will be in class only. It'll be the first 20 minutes of class, and then after that I'll figure out what I'm going to do. I probably will demonstrate some Android Studio to you, just so you get a flavor for it. I know I told you we were going to use that, but there's you'll see why I ended up going to IntelliJ. It's a little bit tricky to just use regular Java in that, but you'll see. All right, we will go ahead and end there, and you all have a good evening.